I didn't just want to break his heart, I wanted to dismantle his throne. So, when I caught my fated mate, the future alpha, scented with the sickly sweet perfume of a human girl, I didn't cry. I walked across the hall, bypassed his shock-widened eyes, and knelt before the one man everyone feared, his brother, the butcher alpha, Silas. I didn't offer him my heart, I offered him the one thing he wanted more than power, the ultimate revenge. The first thing that struck me wasn't the sight. It was the scent. Wrong. Soft. Sickeningly sweet. Human. It clung to him like a lie that had been told too many times, layered over his natural musk, sharp and familiar, the scent I had known since the moment fate itself had bound us together. My chest tightened as the realization crawled up my spine, cold and deliberate. My mate. My future alpha. Scented with another woman. And not just any woman. A human. The pack hall was alive with voices, laughter, the scrape of goblets against stone. Torches flickered along the high walls, their flames reflecting off banners stitched with our crest, symbols of loyalty, legacy, power. This was supposed to be a night of unity. A council gathering. A reminder of what we stood for. Instead, it became the night my world crystallized into something sharp enough to cut. He stood across the hall, speaking confidently with the elders, his posture relaxed, dominant, utterly unaware that the bond between us was screaming. Our mate link pulsed once, faint, uneasy, before he slammed it shut. That alone told me everything. I didn't rush toward him. I didn't cry out. I didn't collapse. I inhaled again, slowly, forcing my wolf to still. Vanilla. Sugar. Soap. Human cities clung to her scent like rot. My fingers curled at my sides, nails biting into my palms as memories flashed, his whispered promises, his vows of loyalty, the way he'd sworn no one else could ever exist for him. Lies were easier when spoken by future kings. I watched him laugh. And in that moment, something inside me went very, very quiet. Not broken. Focused. I turned away from him without a word. Gasps followed me as I crossed the hall, soft at first, then rippling outward as realization spread. Wolves felt betrayal the way humans felt earthquakes. The air shifted. Conversations died. My mate finally noticed. His head snapped up, eyes widening as I passed him by. "Wait," he started, reaching out. I didn't slow. I walked past the council dais. Past the elders. Past the alpha's chair. Toward the shadows at the far end of the hall. Where Silas stood. The butcher alpha. My mate's older brother. He leaned against a stone pillar, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Scars traced his knuckles and jaw, trophies of battles no one spoke about. Wolves feared him not because he sought power, but because he had never needed to. His gaze locked onto mine as I approached. The hall was silent now. Every step felt like fate itself holding its breath. When I reached him, I didn't hesitate. I lowered myself. Need a stone. Gasps erupted. Shock cracked through the bond once shared with the traitor behind me. Silas didn't move. Slowly, deliberately, I lifted my chin and met the eyes of the most dangerous alpha alive. "I don't want his heart," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my veins. "I want his throne." A slow, dangerous smile curved Silas's mouth. "And what?" he asked quietly, are you offering me in return, little Luna? I held his gaze, unflinching. Revenge. The hall erupted into chaos. And somewhere behind me, my former mate realized, too late, that he had just lost everything. The air smelled of wax, roses, and fear. Not my fear, but the unspoken trepidation of everyone in the pack hall. Silas had arranged it perfectly, a ceremony that was simple, almost austere, yet magnetic in its brutality. Every wolf present felt the tension thrumming beneath their fur, a pulse that wasn't only mine. They knew, as I did, that this marriage wasn't about love. It was about power. And in the center of it, the butcher alpha, Silas, radiated dominance like a wolf marking his territory with fangs and bone. I walked down the aisle not as a bride swooning for her mate, but as a strategist stepping into the lion's den. My skirts swished against the cold stone floor. My hands were steady, my head held high. Eyes followed me, some curious, some envious, and many fearful. Even the elders, known for their centuries-long wisdom and patience, leaned forward with the kind of restrained interest that could snap in an instant. Silas stood at the altar, or rather, the dais that had always been reserved for the alpha, his silhouette commanding. He didn't glance down the aisle like a man welcoming his bride. He waited. Cold, precise, unyielding. My heart, the human part of me that had once thought it might flutter for him, stayed steady. Nothing about Silas invited softness. He did not give comfort. He gave power. The ex, my mate, the future alpha who had been so confident of his world, he sat to the side, flanked by his few loyal followers, his face a mask of shock, jealousy, and denial. I caught the faint tremor of betrayal in his posture as our eyes met briefly. That glance was heavy with everything he'd lost, yet I didn't flinch. This was not the night to weep. This was the night to claim my place. The vows were almost ceremonial in their brevity. Silas's voice was low, resonant, carrying a subtle threat in every word. "You are mine," he said. Not, "I take you," or "I will love you," but the raw, undeniable declaration of ownership that was both horrifying and exhilarating. The elders' quills scratched, witnesses whispered behind hands, and the ex fumed quietly, powerless. "And you," he continued, eyes narrowing on me, "will learn quickly that loyalty is earned, not given." I smiled. Not a smile of affection, but of calculation. I had come here with a promise, to dismantle my mate's life piece by piece, and I would not let it slip. "Yes," I said. "And you will learn that revenge can be as sweet as power." Gasps. Whispers. Shock. And somewhere in that crowd, the ex's chest tightened, his wolf roiling under his skin. The scent of human perfume still lingered faintly on him, a mark of his betrayal that I would remind him of every day. When the ceremony concluded, we were declared bound, not by love, not by desire, but by strategy, ambition, and the thrill of the hunt. I placed my hand in Silas's and felt the weight of it, not tenderness, but the unshakable grip of a wolf who would not allow weakness. And I liked it. We didn't retreat to a honeymoon. There was no sweet wine and gentle candlelight. There was only the chamber, the war room, the strategy room, the private domain of the butcher alpha. And it was magnificent. Every shadow, every torch, every scar etched into the walls told a story of conquest, blood, and dominance. Silas did not speak of love. He did not offer comfort. He offered observation. He watched me like a predator sizing up a rival, calculating my strengths, testing my resolve, mapping my weaknesses. And I returned the gaze with my own careful measurements. We were equals in intellect, if not in sheer raw power. "You are afraid," he said suddenly, breaking the silence that had grown between us like a living thing. "I am cautious," I corrected softly. "Fear is for those who are unprepared." He arched an eyebrow, a faint smirk curving the edges of his scarred lips. "Cautious. That is acceptable. Fear is never useful." And just like that, I understood a little more about Silas. He was not a man who made mistakes. Not out of arrogance, but because he never acted without understanding the stakes, the consequences, the exact angle from which the enemy might strike. The night stretched. I studied him, noting the way his hands moved, the way his wolf pulsed under his skin, the precision of his voice and posture. He did not try to dominate me through force, not yet. He tested me, measured me, allowed me to walk the edges of his control, but not beyond them. I realized in that quiet, tense room that fear alone was never his weapon. His weapon was respect. And the kind of respect earned through cunning, patience, and survival. By dawn, I knew something remarkable. Silas had not yet touched me with the intent of claiming what the ex had taken for granted. He had not made love, nor forced intimacy. There was no tenderness, only the implicit power of his presence. And yet, I felt it, an undercurrent of unspoken connection, the thread of bond that even rage and betrayal could not sever. Breakfast was quiet. The pack watched as I ate, and I could sense their judgments, their whispers. Some pitied me. Some feared what I had done. But most were simply awed. This was not the night of tears. This was the night the butcher Alpha had married a Luna who refused to be broken. Later, Silas took me to the council chamber, not for politics, but for demonstration. He seated me beside him as he addressed the pack leaders, his hand brushing against mine just barely, a reminder of who I belonged to now. "The woman beside me," he said, voice low but carrying across the stone chamber, "is not weak. She is not sentimental. She is my Luna, and she knows the consequences of betrayal. Let this be a lesson to anyone who doubts the power of our bond." Whispers spread, eyes widened, and I felt something I hadn't anticipated, a small, satisfying flicker of victory. Not just for me, but for the justice I had promised myself. That evening, when the ex attempted a confrontation, it was Silas who blocked him. "Do not speak her name unless you intend to die tonight," he growled. The ex faltered, realizing that his future, once secure, had been shattered entirely. And I, watching from the corner, felt the thrill of power settle into my bones. Silas didn't smile. He didn't laugh. But when he leaned closer and whispered, "You are more dangerous than I thought," I knew our bond had begun. Not love. Not trust. Not yet. But the recognition of equal strength. And in the world of wolves, that was often the most lethal thing of all. The night drew on. The hall was empty, the torches guttering low. Silas sat across from me, a faint scarred smile hinting at amusement. "You will need allies," he said. "And enemies." I nodded. "I have already begun counting both." And in that moment, a small truth settled deep in my chest. This marriage was not a trap. It was not a cage. It was the battlefield. And we were both armed to the teeth. Sleep came, but it was not gentle. The scent of betrayal clung to my mind, mixed with the raw presence of Silas at my side, a constant reminder that power had a price, and I had just begun to pay it. The first time I truly understood Silas, the man they called the Butcher Alpha, was not in battle, nor in council, nor during any ceremonial display of dominance. It was in silence. A quiet that carried more weight than roars, more danger than blades. I had spent the day walking the perimeter of our territory with him, ostensibly as a Luna learning the ways of the pack. But I knew it was a test. Every step, every glance, every flicker of his expression measured me, gauged my reactions, calculated my worth. And I did not flinch. Not once. "You are different from the others," Silas said suddenly, his voice low, almost a growl. We were perched atop a jagged rock overlooking the forest, the setting sun bleeding orange and gold through the pines. They would have cowered. Pretended to submit. He paused, measuring the air between us. "You kneel on your own terms." I met his gaze, holding the edge of his scrutiny without blinking. "I kneel because it is necessary," I said. "Not because I am afraid." He studied me. His wolf beneath the skin pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and restrained. "Necessary," he repeated. "Interesting. Most Luna bend. Most Luna break. Most Luna," he stopped, a faint scowl breaking across his face. "Most Luna are meaningless." I allowed a slow, deliberate smile. "Then you should find me useful." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not the cruel, predator laughter I had expected, but a short, almost human exhale of amusement. "Perhaps you are," he said. "Or perhaps you are exactly the type of foolishness I should crush." The forest whispered around us. Birds fluttered in the distance. Wolves in the lower dens stirred at the scent of our presence. And I realized something chilling. Silas was not the type of alpha who could be read by instinct alone. To understand him, one had to pay attention, observe the patterns, and never assume softness in a man whose reputation was built on brutality. "You have enemies," I said, breaking the silence. "And they are patient." He tilted his head slightly. "And you?" "I have a mate," I said. "A traitor. And I intend to dismantle him." The mention of the word drew a faint shadow across his face. Not anger. Not surprise. Just a recognition, a silent nod to the cunning I was capable of. "Ambition is useful," he murmured. "But obsession," his voice trailed off, "can be dangerous." "I am aware of the risk," I said, unwavering. "But I am not here to survive. I am here to win." Silas's gaze hardened. For a moment, it was the butcher that emerged, the alpha that every wolf in the territory feared and whispered about. His presence expanded, filling the space, bending the very air around him. And yet, for all his fearsome aura, there was something else. Respect. Not for me yet, never that, but recognition of potential. Something they had never seen in a Luna before. The following days were a whirlwind of political maneuvers and subtle intimidation. I learned quickly that power in Silas's pack was not wielded openly. It was negotiated in whispers, enforced with small demonstrations of lethal competence. Every elder, every beta, every subordinate was tested, and I was not exempt. When I entered the council chamber, the eyes of the pack leaders followed me like hawks circling prey. The ex, still reeling from his own fall from grace, glared at me from across the room, the faintest tremor of desperation under his fanged jaw. I did not acknowledge him. Instead, I allowed my gaze to find Silas's, and a subtle tension passed between us, electric and unspoken. The council meeting began with minor disputes over territory lines and hunting grounds. But the ex, predictably, could not resist the urge to undermine me. "The Luna seems," he started, smirking faintly, overconfident for her position. I let the words hang in the air. Then, with the patience of a predator, I replied, voice measured, precise, perhaps. "But I have the right to be. After all, I stand beside the Alpha, not beneath him." A murmur ran through the room. The ex's scowl deepened, and I felt Silas's eyes burn into mine. Not anger, but approval. Subtle. Dangerous. That one small, silent acknowledgement was more valuable than any public praise. It meant he was watching, listening, calculating, and perhaps, for the first time, trusting me to act with strategy rather than emotion. It was in the evening, after the council had dispersed, that Silas truly tested me. The room was dark except for the fire that burned low in the hearth. He stood near the flames, his silhouette long and imposing, and gestured for me to sit. "Tell me," he said, voice soft but carrying a weight that made my blood chill, "what would you do if your enemies tried to destroy you while I was away?" I met his gaze steadily. "I would survive. I would strike back. I would ensure they regret the day they underestimated me." He stepped closer, and the air shifted. I could smell the wild strength in him, the wolf beneath the human mask, restrained but present. "And if your actions endangered the pack?" "Then they would have made a choice," I said, my tone unwavering. "And I would deal with it." He studied me silently for what felt like an eternity. Then, with a movement so subtle it could have been missed, he knelt before me. Not in submission. Not in supplication. But as a test, a challenge, a demonstration of mutual understanding. "You understand the weight of this position," he said. "You understand the consequences. You understand that loyalty is earned and that betrayal is punished." I nodded slowly, feeling the power in that moment. The Butcher Alpha, feared and unchallenged, had knelt before me, not as a sign of weakness, but as a declaration of trust in my judgment, my intelligence, my capability. "Then," he said, rising with the same lethal grace that had made him feared across territories, "you will survive. And together, we will ensure that our enemies learn what it means to cross us." The days that followed were lessons in control, patience, and subtle power. Silas allowed me to command minor tasks, observe his leadership, and slowly learn the art of influence. But he also made it clear that the ultimate authority remained with him. And yet, his observation taught me something crucial: leadership was not brute force alone. It was psychology, strategy, anticipation. I began to understand the rhythm of the pack, the loyalties, the grudges, the fears. I learned to whisper in the right ears, to plant suggestions that would grow into actions without ever appearing overt. By the time the ex dared to approach me, it was too late. He no longer wielded power over me. He had no leverage. His wolf snarled beneath his skin, but I could see it trembling in fear. Silas, always silent and observing, never interfered directly. Instead, he allowed me to navigate, to test, to assert control. The Butcher Alpha trusted me to play the game, knowing my intelligence and cunning were an extension of his own will. And in that, I realized, we were no longer just Luna and Alpha. We were partners in strategy, bound by ambition, revenge, and the unspoken understanding that power respected strength above all else. Weeks later, the ex attempted one final confrontation. He cornered me in the outer chambers, his wolf snarling beneath his skin, teeth bared. "You think this marriage makes you safe?" he hissed. "You think Silas would care for you?" I met his eyes with calm fury. "I do not need Silas to care for me. I need him to respect me, and he does. You, on the other hand, have proven nothing." Before he could strike, Silas appeared, silent as a shadow, and the ex froze. The room seemed to shrink under the butcher Alpha's presence. Without a word, Silas's gaze alone communicated, "Touch her and die." The ex fled, humiliated, broken, powerless. And I felt a rush of triumph, not vengeance, not love, but vindication. For the first time since I had caught my mate's betrayal, I felt untouchable. But power, as I knew, always invited new threats. And our enemies were growing bolder by the day. The morning came with the scent of smoke and frost, a biting reminder that winter had arrived, draping the territory in gray, cold light. The pack stirred with the first rays of dawn, their paws crunching against frost-covered leaves, nostrils flaring with the sense of each other, and of me. They always knew when I was near, but I had learned how to move among them as both a shadow and a presence, commanding attention without demanding it. Silas, as always, was already awake. He moved silently in the great hall, the firelight glinting off his scars, eyes like molten steel. When I entered, he did not greet me. He did not ask me to sit. He simply watched. The subtle tilt of his head, the ever-present tension in his shoulders, spoke louder than words. "You slept well?" I asked, my voice quiet, careful. "Sleep is for those who have no enemies," he replied, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the walls. "And we have many." I nodded, aware of the truth in his words. My mate, the traitor who had once claimed me, was still plotting in the shadows. But there were others too, human intruders, rogue wolves from distant territories, and factions within our own pack who saw my presence as a threat. And then, of course, there was her, the human girl. She had been naive, fragile, weak. Or so I had believed. But now, I realized, she was a variable I could exploit. The ex had not been idle. While Silas and I walked the perimeter of our lands, reviewing hunting grounds and observing patrols, I had gathered whispers of his secret meetings. Humans were not supposed to exist within our territory, but she had slipped through, guided by arrogance and ignorance. And he had allowed it. This was no accident. "This girl," I said to Silas later that evening, standing in the training yard while the sun dipped low behind the mountains, "she isn't innocent. She is being used." He didn't respond immediately. He was practicing combat forms, each movement fluid and lethal. Even in his leisure, he was calculating. Finally, he stopped, his wolf-like gaze piercing mine. "And what do you propose?" he asked. "Do we eliminate her?" "No," I said firmly. "We use her. She is the ex's weakness. His human weakness. And every weakness can be turned into a weapon." Silas's smirk was faint but dangerous. "I like the way you think. Subtle. Precise. Calculated. But you must be careful. A mistake could cost us more than you imagine." "I am aware," I said. "I have already planned for contingencies." The first step was observation. I needed to know her habits, her fears, the things she prized most. I shadowed her from a distance, learning how she moved, how she spoke, how she interacted with the few allies the X had left. She was cautious, but inexperienced, unaware of the complex power games unfolding around her. I felt no pity. Only opportunity. The day I struck my first move, it was subtle. The X had called a small gathering in a clearing, ostensibly to negotiate. I arrived as expected, standing at Silas's side while the human girl approached, nervous and trembling. The pack was present, each member sensing the tension like the electric charge before a storm. "I hear you wish to speak," I said, voice steady and cold. "Very well. Speak your mind." The girl flinched, glancing at the X as though seeking guidance, but the moment she saw me, I saw her composure falter. I leaned slightly closer to her, just enough for my words to carry on the wind, audible only to her. "Your choices matter," I said softly. "One misstep and you will regret the day you ever entered this territory." Her eyes widened, and I could see her confidence crack. She took a step back, almost stumbling. The X's jaw tightened, realizing too late that I had asserted dominance without raising a hand. "You underestimate us," he said finally, voice tight. You cannot underestimate a wolf who has already faced betrayal and survived," I interrupted. "You, and you're human, are weak. And weakness," I paused, letting the word linger, "is punished." The murmur that ran through the gathering was palpable. Even the pack members who were neutral or loyal to the X were beginning to reconsider their positions. Fear and respect were not born from threats alone, they were earned through decisive, intelligent action. And I had just demonstrated both. Over the next several days, I continued my campaign. Small, calculated moves that undermined the human girl's influence and credibility while bolstering Silas's perception of me as a capable partner. I intercepted messages, redirected allies, and planted rumors that turned the X's supporters against him. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. The human girl, once his greatest asset, had become a liability, her fear and uncertainty a mirror reflecting his own incompetence. Silas watched silently throughout all of it, offering no interference, only observation. And in his eyes, I saw something rare: approval. Not affection, not trust entirely, but the recognition that I was capable of executing a plan with precision, ruthlessness, and intelligence. One evening, as we walked along the frozen river that cut through our territory, he finally spoke. "You are changing," he said quietly. "Not just the pack, but him. You are reshaping everything." I nodded, the icy wind whipping my hair against my face. "That was the plan." He stopped, turning to face me fully. The river shimmered in the fading light, reflecting his sharp features, his scars, and the raw power that made him feared by all. "And you have not faltered?" "Not once," I said. His lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Good. Because now, things will become dangerous." Indeed, danger arrived sooner than I expected. The X, desperate and humiliated, attempted an assassination. Not on me directly, no, he was too cautious for that, but on Silas. He had aligned with rogue wolves from distant territories, hoping that a well-timed strike would remove the Butcher Alpha and allow him to reclaim power. The night of the attack was quiet at first. I sensed movement before the wolves arrived, a subtle shift in the scent of the forest, the faint whisper of paws against frost-covered ground. I woke Silas immediately, and together, we moved through the darkness like predators. The battle was swift, brutal, and precise. Silas's combat skills were terrifying to behold. Every movement was calculated, every strike deadly. And I, too, acted with precision, intercepting the human elements, sabotaging their coordination, turning their own plans against them. By dawn, the attackers were either dead, captured, or fleeing. The X, wounded and humiliated, barely escaped. His human weakness, once his shield, was now a mark of his failure. Silas watched me silently after the fight, his wolf calm but alert. "You did well," he said simply. No praise, no affection, just acknowledgement. And yet, it was enough. Enough to know that he saw me not just as a Luna, but as a partner capable of matching him in strategy and execution. In the days that followed, I consolidated my position further. The human girl was removed from the territory entirely, escorted out under the watchful eyes of loyal pack members. Her departure sent a ripple of relief and unease through the pack. Relief because a threat had been neutralized, unease because she had been the tool of the X, and the X still lingered, wounded but plotting. I turned my attention to the pack, observing the subtle shifts in loyalty. Those who had doubted me now watched with caution. Some whispered admiration, some whispered fear. All, however, understood one truth: I was no longer a passive Luna. I was a force. And I would not be ignored. Silas, ever the shadow beside me, allowed me these moments of control, these small victories. He did not interfere, but his presence was constant, a reminder that power was not only in action, but in alignment with strength. I began to understand the rhythm of our partnership. He provided the raw power, the intimidation, the presence that made others bend. I provided strategy, subtlety, and precision. Together, we were unstoppable. One evening, as we watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in blood red and gold, Silas spoke again, his voice quieter than usual. "You are learning quickly," he said. "But the true test has yet to come." I met his gaze steadily. "I am ready for it." His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, tense, measured, almost anticipating. "Good," he said. "Because the X is not finished. And there are others who would see us fall." I smiled faintly, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. Danger was never a deterrent, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to assert control, to demonstrate power, and to continue the slow dismantling of those who had once thought they could betray me. And in that moment, standing beside the Butcher Alpha, I understood a fundamental truth: I did not merely survive betrayal. I used it. I harnessed it. I transformed it into weaponized power, and there was no limit to what could be achieved when a Luna dared to embrace her strength fully. The X would learn this lesson soon enough. And when he did, it would be final. The forest was silent, almost eerily so, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the ground and the branches with white. Every footfall echoed against the frost, a reminder that in our territory, nothing moved without my awareness. I had learned long ago to listen. To scent. To anticipate. And now, standing beside Silas, I realized that even the cold, the stillness, the seemingly empty landscape, held threats. The X was not gone. He had retreated, but his plots were growing more desperate, more reckless. And he was not alone. I watched Silas as he moved silently through the trees, his steps measured, every muscle coiled like a spring. The Butcher Alpha was terrifying, not just in battle, but in presence. To the untrained eye, he was a man. To me, he was a storm made flesh, a wolf in human form, every motion radiating lethal potential. And tonight, that storm was mine to command. Our plan was simple in theory, complex in execution. The X had rallied allies, rogue wolves from distant territories, exiles, and mercenaries who craved power. Silas and I would strike first, with precision, dismantling their forces before they could organize. But precision required patience, and patience demanded observation. We split into two groups. Silas and I would lead the strike team, the rest of our loyal pack would flank and contain. I could feel the tension coiling in the pack, the anticipation of battle. Wolves knew instinctively when power was about to be tested, and ours was a display that would leave no doubt. The first attack came at twilight. Shadowed figures moved through the trees, silent as death. The X had learned nothing from his last failure. He underestimated us. I signaled to Silas, who acknowledged with a mere tilt of his head. Our wolves surged forward like a tide, teeth bared, claws flashing, scents mingling in the freezing air. I moved with calculated precision, intercepting attackers, cutting off escape routes, turning their coordination against them. The human mercenaries had no idea what hit them. Wolves struck like lightning, disappearing into the trees before reinforcements could respond. The X watched from the ridge above, helpless, as his carefully laid plans unraveled. Silas was in his element. Every strike he delivered was measured, deadly, designed not to maim but to intimidate. Wolves fled before him, and those who stood their ground were crushed under his sheer power. I followed closely, not just as a companion, but as a strategist, anticipating attacks, positioning allies, exploiting weaknesses. The bond between us, the subtle, electric thread that had begun to awaken, guided our movements. I could sense his intentions before he acted, and he, in turn, responded to my cues. We were no longer just Alpha and Luna. We were a unit, seamless in action, a deadly force of intellect and strength combined. The X tried to intervene directly, charging through the fray with fury and desperation. But his wolf was unruly, untrained, unprepared for the butcher's calculated violence. Silas intercepted him with terrifying ease, blocking strikes, countering, disarming with a fluidity that left no room for escape. "Your arrogance," Silas growled, voice low and lethal, "is your undoing." I moved beside him, positioning myself to trap the X completely. He realized too late that he was cornered, not by brute strength alone, but by the combined strategy of two wolves, one mind, two hearts, working in tandem. "End of the line," I said, voice calm, cold, final. The X fell to his knees, panting, humiliated, bloodied, not by hatred alone, but by recognition of his failure. And I understood, fully, the satisfaction of revenge. Not in slaughter, not in rage, but in the perfect orchestration of his downfall. The battle was not yet over. Rogue wolves, hearing the clash, attempted to flank us, but Silas's pack moved with coordination, discipline, and precision. Every move was anticipated. Every attack countered. And I, at his side, directed movements, blocked threats, and ensured that not a single mistake went unpunished. When the last enemy fled, either dead or retreating into the shadows, the forest fell silent again. The only sounds were the labored breaths of our pack and the soft crunch of snow beneath our feet. Silas looked at me then, his gaze intense, assessing, almost measuring. "You were magnificent," he said, voice low, not praise, not affection, just acknowledgement. But in the way he said it, I knew it carried more weight than any words could convey. "And you," I replied softly, "are terrifying." He allowed a faint smile, fleeting, ghost-like, before turning his attention to the horizon. Terrifying is not enough, he said. We must be respected. Feared. Unchallenged. I nodded, feeling the pulse of our bond. The fight had not only eliminated threats but awakened something in both of us, something primal, something dangerous. It was more than strategy now. It was trust. A bond forged in fire, blood, and precision. That night, after the battle, the pack gathered to assess losses and strategize for the future. Wolves whispered of our actions, spreading tales of efficiency, dominance, and ruthlessness. Even those who had doubted me now watched with caution, awe, and, in some cases, fear. Silas remained silent beside me, a shadow of power, observing the room, the people, the territory. And when a lone wolf approached with a concern about future threats, I spoke first. My voice carried authority, calm and measured. Every threat has been neutralized. But vigilance must remain. Those who would challenge us are already planning. We must anticipate them before they act. The wolf bowed. Understood, Luna. Silas's gaze flicked to me, and I saw it again, the faint acknowledgement, the recognition of my capability. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence, constant and looming, was a validation stronger than words. Later, Silas and I retreated to the inner chambers, away from the pack. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and blood, a lingering reminder of the battle. You are learning, he said finally, voice low, deliberate. Not just tactics, but leadership. Strategy. Control. You are formidable. I met his gaze steadily. I have to be. This pack, this territory, my enemies, none of them will show mercy. Why should I? He approached, close enough for me to feel the heat radiating from his body, the power in every line of muscle, every scar, every unspoken threat. Because mercy is not your tool, he said. Strength is. Precision is. And loyalty is earned, not demanded. I nodded. I understand. He stepped even closer, the tension between us electric, dangerous. His wolf pulsed beneath the surface, coiled and restrained, ready to act. And in that moment, I felt it, the bond between us, subtle but undeniable, awakening. Not love, not yet. Something sharper, more potent, recognition, respect, alignment. You are more than I expected, he said quietly. And that is dangerous for both of us. I smiled faintly. Dangerous is exactly what I intend to be. The bond between Silas and me was no longer dormant. It was active, awakening, and fueling every decision, every movement, every strategic choice. Together, we were unstoppable, not merely in battle, but in the politics, the manipulation, the subtle games of control that ruled this territory. And as I lay that night, listening to the low growl of Silas's wolf beside me, I understood a fundamental truth. We were no longer just Luna and Alpha. We were partners in power, forged in blood, trust, and shared ambition. And the world would tremble before us. The X would learn this truth soon enough. And when he did, it would be final. The council hall had never felt smaller. Or colder. Perhaps it was the chill of winter pressing against the stone walls, or perhaps it was the weight of inevitability that hung over every wolf present. I stood at Silas's side, my posture perfect, my eyes sharp. Every wolf in the room, elders, alphas from neighboring territories, even the pack loyal to the X, watched with a mixture of fear, awe, and apprehension. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that preceded decisive action. Silas did not sit. He leaned against the stone dais, arms crossed, a predator in repose, his presence a tangible force that radiated authority. His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, calm, precise, restrained, but lethal. And I, standing beside him, felt our bond vibrating, subtle but undeniable. Every heartbeat, every breath, every movement was a reminder that we were no longer just Luna and Alpha. We were a force. The X entered last, as always, trying to maintain composure. His steps were measured, his eyes darting toward me, toward Silas, as if he could find some opening, some leverage, some weapon that would allow him to reclaim what he had lost. He had none. Not anymore. Everyone, Silas began, voice low, resonant, carrying without effort to the farthest corners of the hall, you have witnessed attempts to destabilize our territory. You have seen treachery in action. You have heard whispers of rebellion, of manipulation, of betrayal. And yet, here we stand. Stronger. United. Undivided. The X's jaw tightened. I caught the faint scent of panic beneath his usual arrogance. Every word, every breath from Silas was a calculated strike, not with claws or teeth, but with authority. I stepped forward, letting my presence be felt. You have all been witnesses, I said, voice calm but carrying, to what happens when weakness is exposed. Those who betray will be punished. Those who falter will be left behind. And those who fail to act with intelligence will not survive the consequences of their choices. A murmur ran through the hall. Even the X's allies, those who had been loyal or neutral, glanced at each other nervously. They understood, instinctively, that the tide had shifted. And I, standing beside the butcher Alpha, felt the thrill of power settle in my chest. Silas's gaze flicked to me, and I understood the unspoken command, finish this. Demonstrate dominance. Seal the fate of our enemies. I turned my attention fully to the X, your attempts to undermine this pack, to manipulate those you thought would follow you, have failed, I continued. And now, you will face the consequences. He opened his mouth to protest, but Silas's movement stopped him. With a single step forward, Silas closed the space between them, the air trembling with the sheer force of his presence. The X's wolf recoiled, instinctively sensing the danger that had always loomed but never been fully realized until now. You underestimated us, Silas said, voice a low growl that resonated through the hall. You underestimated the Luna. You underestimated the strength of this pack. And now, you will learn exactly what that costs. The X fell to his knees, as expected, but this time it was not out of desperation, it was out of recognition. He had lost. His allies were too few, too scattered. His human weakness, once a shield, had become a symbol of his failure. And I could see the realization in his eyes, he was finished. I took a step closer, letting my voice carry. You had a choice, I said softly, each word deliberate, cutting through the silence. You could have honored your bond. You could have respected your mate. Instead, you chose betrayal. And betrayal, I paused, letting the word linger, has a price. The council hall was silent now. Every wolf understood the message. Strength would be rewarded, weakness punished, and cunning would always prevail. Silas placed a hand on my shoulder, a subtle but unmistakable signal of alignment and support. Our wolves stirred, sensing each other across the invisible thread that bound us. The X's wolf whimpered beneath his skin, a sharp, instinctive recognition that the game was over, and that the predators who played it now held all the cards. You will relinquish your claim to leadership, Silas said, voice cold and precise. Effective immediately. Any attempt to regain power will be met with consequences you cannot survive. The X opened his mouth, but I interrupted. And you will leave the territory entirely. Any attempt to return will be considered an act of war, and war will be swift and final. He swallowed hard, knowing he had no leverage, no allies, no path to redemption. The human girl had gone, the pack had shifted loyalty, and his former strength was now a shadow. He bowed his head, humiliated, defeated. And I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, not cruelty, but justice. The pack responded immediately. Wolves who had been unsure, who had been waiting for signs of weakness or failure, now approached us with respect. Subtle bows, lowered eyes, and careful gestures communicated allegiance. Loyalty was no longer a question, it was earned through observation, strategy, and the sheer presence of strength. I could feel the bond with Silas pulsing more strongly now. Not love, not yet, but something sharper, more potent, recognition, alignment, partnership. Together, we were not just ruler and Luna. We were architects of destiny, arbiters of justice, and enforcers of power. Later that evening, after the council had dispersed and the pack had returned to their duties, Silas and I walked through the territory. The snow had fallen heavier, covering the ground in white, muffling sound, transforming the forest into a pristine battlefield for our thoughts. You have changed everything, Silas said quietly, voice almost intimate in the stillness. Not just the X, not just the pack, everything. I looked at him, letting my gaze meet his. That was the plan. He stopped, studying me. And yet, you are more dangerous than I anticipated. Not just to our enemies, but to me. I raised an eyebrow. To you? Yes, he said, voice low, deliberate. Your intelligence, your cunning, your ruthlessness, you are a match for me in ways few could ever be. And that is both rare and dangerous. I smiled faintly. Then you should be careful. I do not forgive mistakes easily. And I never forget betrayal. Silas allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Good. Then we are alike in more ways than I thought. That night, in the inner chambers, our conversation took a subtler turn. The battle was over, the throne claimed, but the energy between us had shifted. The bond was no longer dormant. It was active, vibrant, and undeniable. We were aligned not just in strategy, but in purpose, in power, and in the unspoken thrill of domination. You have proven yourself, Silas said, voice soft but heavy with intent. Not just as a Luna, but as a strategist, a leader, a force. And you, I said quietly, stepping closer, have proven that even the strongest can be challenged. His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, tense, restrained, and aware. Challenged, he murmured, is dangerous. I thrive on danger, I said. It sharpens me, focuses me, strengthens me. He studied me for a long moment, eyes dark, intense, almost hungry. And I felt it, the bond, awakening, shifting, pulsing, growing. Not love, not yet, but something sharper, recognition, alignment, partnership. A bond forged not in comfort, but in fire, blood, and power. And in that moment, I knew something profound. The throne had been claimed, the X defeated, but the game was far from over. Power demanded vigilance, cunning, and the willingness to embrace darkness. And with Silas at my side, would not merely survive, I would dominate. By dawn, the territory had shifted. Wolves moved with new allegiance, whispers of loyalty spread like wildfire, and the X's shadow faded into nothing. Silas and I stood atop the ridge, overlooking the land, the snow sparkling like shards of glass under the rising sun. "We have won," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "But the game is never truly over." He nodded, wolf pulsing beneath his skin, eyes sharp, aware. And I understood the truth. With power comes responsibility, vigilance, and the constant threat of challengers. But with strength, intelligence, and alignment, even the fiercest storms could be navigated. And together, we were unstoppable. The air was thick with tension, electric and suffocating, as though the forest itself sensed the storm that was about to break. Winter had tightened its grip, frost coating every branch, every rock, every patch of earth. The pack stirred, uneasy, aware that what was coming would change everything. The X had returned. Not silently, not subtly, but with the arrogance of a wolf who believed he could reclaim what he had lost. And this time, he brought allies, rogue wolves, mercenaries, even humans who had no idea the danger they courted. Their collective confidence was misguided. Their underestimation of Silas, of me, of our bond, would be their undoing. I sensed the fear first. Subtle shifts in the scent of the forest, the way the pack's wolves paused mid-step, ears flicking, muscles tensing. Then I saw him, my mate, the traitor, striding confidently through the trees with his ragged band of supporters. His eyes locked onto me, burning with fury, humiliation, and desperate resolve. He thought he could challenge Silas. He thought he could undo everything we had built. He was wrong. Silas and I met at the ridge overlooking the clearing where the confrontation would occur. The snow crunched beneath our feet as we moved into position, our pack behind us, disciplined and alert. I could feel Silas's wolf pulsing against mine, a coiled energy that mirrored my own. Together, we were more than Alpha and Luna. We were a single force, synchronized, lethal, unstoppable. "Are you ready?" Silas asked, his voice low, almost intimate in the quiet. I met his gaze, letting the bond pulse between us. "I was ready the moment I walked into this territory," I said. "And I've been waiting for this day since he betrayed me." He allowed a faint smirk, sharp and dangerous. "Good. Because the moment he steps into that clearing, nothing will be the same." The clearing was vast, ringed by ancient trees whose branches were heavy with snow. Wolves from both sides waited tensely, the silence stretching until it felt like a physical weight pressing down on everyone. The X stepped forward, chest heaving, eyes blazing, wolf coiled beneath his skin. He carried the confidence of desperation, of arrogance, of someone who thought he could defy fate itself. Silas stepped into the center, calm, controlled, a predator in repose. I followed, feeling the bond tighten, our movements synchronized without thought. The X's wolf snarled, sensing the power that surrounded him, but he tried to hide it behind a veneer of defiance. "You should have stayed away," Silas said, voice carrying effortlessly across the snow-laden clearing. "You should have accepted your place." "I will not bow to you," the X shouted, his voice cracking. "I will not be humiliated." Silas's eyes narrowed, and the air itself seemed to hum. "You already have been," he said simply. I stepped forward, placing a hand subtly on Silas's arm. My presence alone communicated strategy, intent, and alignment. "Do not underestimate us," I said softly, letting my voice carry like a blade. "We are no longer the ones you betrayed. We are stronger. We are united. And we are merciless." The ex's eyes flickered to me, then back to Silas, the realization dawning too late. He was not just facing the Butcher Alpha. He was facing the Butcher Alpha and the Luna he had once scorned, the one who had been underestimated, the one who now matched him in cunning and strategy. The duel began with a roar. The X lunged, wolf and human instincts merged into a blur of claws, fangs, and fury. Silas met him head-on, every strike precise, calculated, terrifying. The pack watched in awe and fear as the two alphas clashed, a storm of power, speed, and strategy. I moved through the periphery, intercepting rogue wolves, neutralizing threats, ensuring that nothing could interrupt the confrontation. Every movement was deliberate, every decision critical. My bond with Silas allowed us to anticipate each other, to cover weaknesses, to exploit openings. Together, we were seamless, unstoppable. The X's attacks were ferocious, fueled by rage and desperation. But he was predictable in his arrogance. Silas countered, always one step ahead, his strikes not only defending but punishing, weakening, humiliating. And I, silent, precise, lethal, guided the pack to isolate his allies, leaving him exposed. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Snow turned to slush under the fury of the duel. Wolves howled, claws tore, teeth snapped. And amidst it all, Silas and I moved as one, a predator and partner in perfect harmony. The X faltered, his wolf screaming in frustration and fear. Every strike that landed on him was a reminder of his betrayal, his weakness, and the consequences of underestimating us. Finally, Silas disarmed him, knocking him to his knees in the snow. I stepped forward, letting my gaze meet his, eyes cold, sharp, unyielding. "Your choices have consequences," I said, voice low and deliberate. "You betrayed your mate. You underestimated the pack. You underestimated the Luna. And now, you face the price of your arrogance." The X's wolf whimpered beneath his skin. He looked at me, desperate, pleading, humiliated. And I realized something. Revenge was not only satisfying, it was transformative. It reshaped not just the betrayer, but the betrayed, the pack, and the bond that had been forged in blood and fire. Silas stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. His wolf pulsed against mine, coiled and powerful, protective but restrained. "End this," he said softly, letting the bond carry the command. "End this completely." I nodded. Calmly, precisely, I delivered the final blow, not in anger, not in passion, but in strategy. The X was stripped of power, humiliated, defeated beyond redemption. His allies scattered, defeated or captured, leaving him alone in the snow, broken, trembling. "You will leave this territory," I said, voice carrying across the frozen clearing. "And if you ever return, there will be no mercy. Only the consequences of your arrogance." He nodded, too defeated, too humiliated to speak. And in that moment, I understood the full weight of vengeance, not hatred, but justice, precision, and unassailable power. The pack erupted in controlled celebration. Wolves who had doubted, who had watched silently, now bowed, acknowledged, and pledged loyalty. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly. Silas and I were no longer just Alpha and Luna, we were undisputed rulers, united in strategy, strength, and dominance. Later, as snow fell quietly over the territory, Silas and I stood together, surveying the land. His presence was constant, a reminder of power restrained and lethal, and I felt the bond between us pulse stronger than ever. "You have proven yourself," Silas said quietly, voice low, deliberate. "Not just in battle, but in strategy, in leadership, in strength. You are formidable." "And you," I replied softly, stepping closer, "have shown me what it truly means to be unstoppable." His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, tense, aware, alive. And in that moment, I knew the bond was no longer dormant. It was active, vibrant, and unbreakable. Not love, not yet, but something sharper: alignment, partnership, recognition. Together, we were unstoppable. The X had fallen. Our enemies had been crushed. But power, I knew, was never static. And as the snow fell, blanketing the territory in silence, I realized one truth: the throne was ours, but vigilance would be eternal, and the bond we had forged in fire and blood was the ultimate weapon of all. The forest was silent in the early morning, as if it too were paying tribute to the new order. Snow had settled over the trees and ground, softening the landscape yet sharpening the edges of tension that remained. The territory was ours, unquestioned, but victory was not the end, it was the beginning of vigilance. I walked beside Silas, feeling the familiar pulse of his wolf beneath the surface, a coiled power that mirrored my own. Our bond had grown sharper since the duel against the X. No words were necessary to communicate intent or strategy. The unspoken connection between us guided every movement, every decision. "We have claimed the throne," I said, voice soft but steady, eyes scanning the horizon. "But the territory is still fragile. There are still threats." Silas did not respond immediately. He moved silently, like a shadow, his eyes dark and sharp, taking in the subtle shifts in the pack, the scents in the snow, the distant rustle of branches. Finally, he spoke. "Fragile?" His voice was a low growl, more wolf than human. "No. Not fragile. Resilient. Observant. Loyal, to those who deserve it. The pack has already adapted to our strength. The only threats now are foolish enough to challenge it." I nodded, feeling the bond tighten. It was more than strategy, more than alignment in battle. It was trust, respect, recognition. We had fought together, bled together, and emerged not only victorious but synchronized. And in that synchronization, I realized a truth I had never admitted aloud: I had never felt this safe, or this aware, or this powerful alongside another being. We returned to the council hall to consolidate power formally. Wolves and leaders from surrounding territories had been summoned to witness the transition, and every eye was fixed on us. Silence reigned until Silas stepped forward, his presence commanding attention effortlessly. "This territory," he began, voice deep and resonant, "has been challenged. Treachery has attempted to seize it, and weakness has been punished. But we are unbroken. And from this day forward, loyalty and strength will define those who stand with us." I stepped forward beside him, letting my presence be felt. "And I will ensure that those who betray us, who underestimate us, who act out of arrogance or fear, understand the consequences. The Luna is no longer passive. She observes, she acts, and she strikes with precision." The room shifted under our words. Wolves who had doubted, who had waited, now bowed, acknowledged, whispered, and pledged allegiance. It was subtle, quiet, but unmistakable. The territory had accepted us. Later, in the inner chambers, the energy between Silas and me was electric. The day's formalities had been completed, but the bond we shared demanded acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition of alignment, trust, and growing intimacy. "You have proven yourself," he said softly, voice low, carrying the weight of admiration without vulnerability. "Not just in battle, but in thought, in action, in presence. You are formidable." "And you," I said quietly, stepping closer, letting my gaze meet his, "have shown me what it truly means to command, to dominate, to be unchallenged. You are terrifying, and necessary." His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, a subtle rhythm that mirrored my own. "Terrifying is a tool," he murmured, eyes dark and intense. "Necessary is what I feel when I am with you. Your mind, your instincts, they match mine. And that is rare." I swallowed the sudden awareness of the tension between us, that delicate, dangerous pull that went beyond strategy and survival. "Then we are aligned," I said softly, "in power, in purpose, in this territory." "Yes," he replied, his voice barely above a growl, "aligned. But understand this, alignment is dangerous. The bond we share, it can be lethal." I smiled faintly. "I have never feared lethal. I thrive on it." He stepped even closer, and I felt the heat radiating from him, the coiled energy, the sharp intelligence. Our proximity was more than physical, it was psychic, wolf to wolf, mind to mind. And I realized that in this bond, the line between strategy and desire was becoming dangerously thin. The days that followed were a lesson in consolidation. I worked alongside Silas to restructure the pack, strengthen alliances, and eliminate lingering threats. Every wolf knew the cost of betrayal, the price of weakness, the reward of loyalty. And in all of it, our bond guided us. I led patrols, negotiated alliances, and subtly restructured command hierarchies. Silas watched, silent and approving, occasionally interjecting with his authority to reinforce my actions. Together, we created a territory that was not just secure, but unassailable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the snow-covered mountains, Silas and I surveyed the land from a ridge. His presence was constant, a quiet but overwhelming reminder of power restrained yet ready. "You have changed this territory," he said quietly. "Not through force alone, but through strategy. Through foresight. Through cunning. You are no longer just a Luna. You are the architect of our strength. And you," I replied softly, "have taught me that power is not just force. It is restraint, calculation, precision, and trust." His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, tense, aware, alive. And in that moment, I understood the full depth of our bond. We were not just rulers of the pack, we were partners in dominance, aligned in purpose, intelligence, and instinct. But the bond was not purely professional. In quiet moments, when the pack rested and the forest was still, I felt it stir in subtler ways. Brushes of fingers, the weight of presence, the unspoken electricity of proximity. Silas's gaze lingered longer than necessary. My pulse quickened in response. The predator and the strategist, aligned in thought and purpose, were beginning to recognize something sharper, more potent: desire. It was dangerous. It was risky. It was forbidden in its intensity. And yet, it was undeniable. One night, as snow fell softly against the windows of the inner chambers, Silas approached me. His eyes dark, intense, wolf pulsing beneath the skin, and for the first time, the predator in him softened, not entirely, not fully, but enough for me to feel the pull between us. "You are, unlike anyone I have ever faced," he said, voice low, deliberate. "Not just in thought, not just in action, but in presence. You are my equal." I stepped closer, letting the tension thrum between us. "And you are mine," I said quietly. "Not in ownership, but in alignment. In strength. In purpose." His gaze held mine, dark, intense, unyielding. And I felt it, the bond, alive, pulsing, electric. Not love, not yet, but recognition, alignment, a shared instinct that promised both danger and power. "We are unstoppable," he murmured. "Yes," I agreed, voice steady despite the rapid beat of my heart. "But we must never forget, vigilance is eternal." And in that moment, standing together in the quiet of the inner chambers, I knew that our bond was not just survival. It was dominance, strategy, and a force that could reshape the world. The X was defeated, the territory secure, and yet the bond between us, dangerous, electric, lethal, was the greatest weapon of all. The forest was quiet before dawn, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and whispers of endings and beginnings at once. Frost clung to the trees, glittering like shards of glass in the faint starlight. The X had vanished after his humiliating defeat, but I knew better than to believe he would remain passive. Weakness is rarely accepted, it is often plotted against. I stood beside Silas atop the ridge, surveying the expanse of our territory. The air was crisp, each breath sharp, carrying the scent of snow, pine, and the faint iron tang of battle long past. Our pack moved silently below, alert, disciplined, aware that even in victory, vigilance is eternal. "You feel it too," I said quietly, letting the words hang between us. "The tension, the quiet before the storm." "He hasn't given up. He's planning. Waiting for an opening." Silas's gaze was fixed on the horizon, wolf pulsing beneath the surface. "I know," he murmured. "But he has forgotten one thing, we are no longer vulnerable. And his arrogance, it will be his undoing." I nodded, feeling the pulse of the bond tighten between us. It had grown sharper, more potent, not just in strategy, but in instinct, in understanding. We moved in tandem now, thought and action intertwined, a lethal synergy that no enemy could break. The final confrontation was inevitable. Reports reached us that the X had gathered a small but desperate force at the edge of the territory, humans and rogue wolves alike. They were attempting to create chaos, to reclaim even a fraction of the power they had lost. Silas and I prepared our pack for a decisive strike. Every wolf was positioned, every flank secured, every contingency accounted for. I walked through the ranks, feeling the subtle tension in the air, the anticipation, the fear mingled with respect. "This is it," I whispered to Silas as we moved through the trees, invisible shadows in the snow. "The final dawn." He nodded, wolf low and coiled, ready to strike. "Then let's ensure it burns." We descended into the clearing where the X's forces had gathered. They did not recognize us at first, assuming that desperation alone could overcome the precision, intelligence, and raw power of two bonded alphas. They were wrong. The attack began not with chaos, but with calculation. Wolves surged forward like a tide, teeth bared, claws flashing, fangs sinking into flesh when necessary. I moved like a phantom, intercepting threats, isolating key targets, and ensuring that every move weakened the enemy's cohesion. Silas was a storm incarnate. Every strike, every movement, every growl carried authority and death. Rogue wolves fell before him, humans fled in terror, and the X's forces began to crumble under the combined precision of strategy and raw power. The X himself attempted to intervene directly, charging with desperation, fury, and the arrogance of a wolf who still believed he could reclaim dominance. But we were ready. I moved to intercept, cutting off his path, while Silas struck with lethal precision, blocking, punishing, and disarming him with terrifying efficiency. "You should have stayed away," Silas growled, voice carrying over the clash of battle. "You should have accepted your place. Now, you will face the consequences of every choice, every betrayal." The X's wolf whimpered beneath the surface, realizing too late that he was no longer in control. His human arrogance and desperation were meaningless against our synergy, our bond, and the discipline of our pack. I stepped forward, letting my presence be felt. "You underestimated us," I said softly, letting the words slice through the chaos like a blade. "You betrayed your mate, you disrespected the pack, and you assumed weakness where there was strength. And now, you will see the cost." His gaze flicked to mine, fear and recognition dawning. He realized fully now. He faced the Butcher Alpha and the Luna he betrayed, not just a pack. He was outmatched in power, in strategy, and in instinct. Silas moved beside me, wolf coiled and tense. "End this," he said, the command silent but powerful through the bond. "End it completely." We struck simultaneously. Silas delivered the first incapacitating blow, not with rage, but with precision, leaving the X disoriented and unable to defend himself. I followed, striking at his remaining defenses, ensuring that escape, retaliation, or regrouping was impossible. The X fell to his knees, shivering, bloodied, utterly defeated. His wolf whimpered, broken, and he realized in that instant that his attempts at regaining power were over. He had lost not because of chance, but because of our bond, our strategy, and our unity. "You have failed," I said softly, stepping closer, eyes cold and sharp. "And you will never rise again." Silas's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, wolf pulsing against mine, coiled and protective. "Leave this territory," he growled. "Never return. Any attempt to challenge us again will be met with death." The X bowed his head, silent, defeated, and finally, for the first time, truly aware of the weight of his failures. With the X permanently neutralized, our pack moved to consolidate power. Wolves pledged loyalty openly. Former skeptics were swayed by the demonstration of discipline, strategy, and ruthlessness. The territory was no longer merely secure, it was unquestionable. Silas and I walked together through the ridge at dawn, snow glittering like diamonds in the first light. The air was crisp, the silence profound. And in that moment, we understood something greater than victory. The bond we had forged was more powerful than any weapon, any strategy, or any pack. It was indestructible, alive, and electric. "You have changed everything," Silas said quietly, voice low and intimate. "Not just the territory, but me. You are my equal." "And you," I replied softly, letting the tension thrum between us, "have shown me what it means to be unstoppable. Not alone, but together." His wolf pulsed beneath his skin, tense and aware. "Together," he murmured. "Aligned. Dangerous. Lethal." The days that followed were a balance of vigilance and consolidation. I worked alongside Silas to establish alliances, restructure leadership within the pack, and secure the borders against external threats. Every wolf understood that strength, loyalty, and intelligence were rewarded, while weakness and betrayal carried consequences. And amidst all of this, our bond deepened. Not through words, not through declarations, but through shared instinct, alignment in purpose, and quiet moments of recognition. In the stillness of the snowy nights, I felt the subtle pull between us, dangerous, thrilling, inevitable. One evening, as the last patrol returned and the forest lay quiet beneath a full moon, Silas approached me. His eyes were dark, intense, wolf pulsing beneath the skin. "You are extraordinary," he said softly. "Not just in mind, but in presence. In strength. In spirit. You are mine not by claim, but by alignment." I met his gaze steadily, heart thrumming in rhythm with his wolf. "And you are mine," I whispered. "Not ownership, but bond. Trust. Alignment. Power." The bond between us pulsed, coiled, and electrified. Dangerous, lethal, undeniable. Not love, yet, but recognition, connection, and an intimacy forged in blood, fire, and shared conquest. As dawn broke fully over the snow-covered territory, the first rays of sunlight glinting across the frost, I understood a profound truth. Revenge was not just satisfaction. It was transformation. The X was gone, the pack was ours, and Silas and I had forged a bond stronger than any enemy, any challenge, or any storm. Together, we were unstoppable. Together, we were the rulers of our destiny. And the final dawn was not just the end of the X, it was the beginning of our reign, powerful, unchallenged, and eternal. The snow glistened, the wolves howled in affirmation, and I felt it, the ultimate satisfaction of vengeance completed, justice served, and a bond that would never break. The X is gone, but danger, betrayal, and forbidden love are far from over. Don't miss the next shocking twist. Subscribe to Emmy Romance Collection now, join the pack, and be part of the ultimate alpha romance saga.